Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am so glad that you decided to click on this video. So today I thought it would be fun to talk about some popular BookTok books and kind of just get my rapid fire take on it. I feel like everywhere I go, I see in every bookstore like a TikTok table or like a BookTok table. And I mean, I'm certainly not somebody that's like reading only these like literary underground masterpieces, but a lot of them, they're just, so popular. So I was like, I wonder if anyone cares about my opinions on whether or not these are worth the hype. So with that, I figured this would be a good way to tell. So the first book on here I have is We Are Liars, and that gets a thumbs down for me. I thought this book was ridiculous, and I thought the plot was so predictable. This is a YA book, but I feel like I rarely figure out like big twists. And this was just so blatantly obvious to me. So that book, not a good one, in my opinion. Beach Read, a thumbs up. I love this book. I read it so long ago, like when it came out, so maybe my opinion will have changed if I go back and read it again. But I really loved it. I don't think that my mind would be changed. I still do generally like Emily Henry, with the exception of Happy Place. That one was a mess, but other than that, I've read all of them except People We Meet on Vacation of her adult romances, and I've really liked all of them, so Beach Read is definitely a good one to pick up. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, that's a thumbs up for me. I thought this was beautifully written. Some people think it's maybe too long or a little drawn out, but I loved it. There is a weird romance that I was kind of iffy about, but overall, I think the story itself is just beautiful. So well written, and I want to read more from this author. However, I know she mainly writes fantasy, and I don't really read that. This is sort of like historical fantasy, sci-fi, kind of. I don't really know how to describe it, but again, it's so popular, you've probably already heard of it. Probably don't need a detailed description from me, but I thought this was a great one, so definitely a thumbs up. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This gets a thumbs up from me. This book is just so universally loved. I honestly don't think I know anyone who didn't enjoy this book. It might not be everyone's like absolute favorite of all time, but I think everyone I've ever talked to has at least enjoyed it. So, we've got a little of everything in this book. We've got some like contemporary fiction, we've got historical fiction, we've got some queer rep, we've got some Latina rep. Like, I just think this is such a great book, and the story is fast-paced enough that I think even people who generally don't tend to read historical fiction would still find it to be something worth reading and enjoyable. The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. This one is all over BookTok, and from me, it gets a thumbs up. I know, it might not be the most academic or whatever of books, but it's just for fun. And again, I don't think the writing is great. I don't even think the story is like super complex, but I had a fun time reading this. I've read the other sequels to it. I've read other books by this author, and honestly, I've had fun reading them all. They are not great books, but I've had a good time. Where the Crawdads Sing. This one's tough because I read it a long time ago and I loved it, but I don't know based on like criticism I've heard since then whether I would like it, but I'm still gonna give it a thumbs up. This is a book about a girl who lives in a marsh, and she's kind of abandoned on her own, and she falls in love with this guy, and but it's definitely like a mystery, and it's very, very heavy on talking about like the nature and all of that in like low country South Carolina, and so the descriptions of the setting are fantastic. The story I could see some people maybe not jiving with fully, but I liked it a lot at the time when I read it. Definitely one that I might reread sometime. This is a very general one, but it is Anything by Colleen Hoover is a thumbs down for me. I feel like I don't even need to say much. I have put out whole videos based on my beefs with Colleen Hoover, so please go check those out if you're interested. I just think her writing is not good. I think her storylines can be harmful to who she's marketing for, especially who TikTok is marketing for, a lot of teenagers and young adults who are seeing relationships in her books that are unhealthy and being viewed as healthy because these guys are like the heroes of the story. And to me, that's not right. That doesn't sit well with me. And so for that reason, I really have just written off all Colleen Hoover books. A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I am gonna give this a thumbs up. I have read only the first 2 books in this series, and I mean, I had a fine time reading them. They were not my favorite. They cemented the fact that I am not a fantasy reader, but I think they are a really good intro to fantasy for people like me who haven't really read it, don't think they'll like it, but haven't read much of it to actually be able to make a decision. And this series is so beloved by so many people that generally read all different types of things. And I mean, I think this series has gotten a lot of folks into reading that maybe wouldn't have picked up a book otherwise. And so for that, I love it. For someone like me who is not a fantasy reader and has never even finished this series, I still had an enjoyable time. It's just not something I felt compelled to keep on with. And like, they're long books, so it's not like these are like little things we can whip out real quick. So for that reason, I mean, it's definitely a thumbs up for me. While it's my personal taste, I do think that they're worth the hype and worth reading. The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This, I am gonna say a thumbs up. This is kind of the first thriller that I think I really realized that this was a genre that I really loved. And I mean, I had read some previously. I'd read some Paula Hawkins, Gillian Flynn, but this is the one that I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm a thriller reader. So I think it's a thumbs up. I was definitely surprised at the ending. If I read it again, this is another one where I'm like, I don't know if I would find the same value in it that I did like 5 years ago when I read it for the first time. But at the time, I thought it was really creative, and I was definitely shocked by the twists and turns. I have since only read one other book by this author, but I did really enjoy it. That was The Fury. Just came out this year, and I really enjoyed that one as well. So I do think this is an author that I gel with well, so thumbs up for me. A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. I will say a thumbs up for that one. I, again, read this book many years ago, and I really enjoyed it for what it was. It's a YA book, so I think that at the time I hadn't read a ton of YA, and so I hadn't really adjusted my mindset to this is a book about teenagers because it's written for teenagers. And so I think I had a hard time like kind of feeling into it because I was like, this is dumb girl, like this and that, and she needs to mind her business and this kind of stuff, like those kids these days. But I mean, I think I would still recommend it, particularly for like a lot of the BookTok crowd does tend to be a little bit younger, and so I think that they would probably love this book. I know there's so many sequels now too. I've only read the first one, but I did think it was a pretty good book. And again, if I was like in the YA genre, if I was a YA, I would definitely think this was a really great series, and I'm sure I would have finished reading all of them. The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This is a big thumbs down. I don't understand why people like this book. I really don't. This is... I don't. It's not funny. The romance is not cute. It's literally like, let's have this guy do the bare minimum and I'm supposed to swoon. Like, and this big... I don't know if it's a twist, but this big, like, reveal is so creepy and just, like, eye-roll inducing. It's, like, just so cringe that I mean, this book ended up just one of the worst romances I've ever read. And especially, like, commercially published. Like, this thing has a lot of hype, a lot of big fans, but oh, it's so bad. Definitely don't recommend that one. The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. Thumbs up. I love this book. It's so sweet. It's so, like, just, it's a ride. It's just one of those books that you just go along with it. I fell in love with these characters, and there is a sequel coming out, so I'm very excited for that. But it was, yeah, the characters were so well fleshed out. They were so unique, and they were so funny. It's kids, a lot of the main characters. The two main characters, I guess, are adults, but then there is a whole group of kids that all have kind of like weird quirks about them. Like, one is actually the son of Satan. So, I mean, I thought this was so great. I loved it so much, and I cannot wait for the sequel. The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. I am giving this a thumbs down. I thought this book just was embarrassingly something. embarrassing, I guess. It felt like it was written for children, but it wasn't. Like, the writing was very basic, and the plot, I understand that people like want to, you know, find their inner child, but I didn't get that. I just got that this adult woman needs to like figure her shit out before she goes and tries to adopt a child. Like, ma'am, you need to sort out your own life first. I just did not find this engaging, and it's really well loved by very, very many people that have read it, and I just didn't see it. I think as when I first finished it, I was like, okay, that was all right. And as time has gone on, I've realized that less and less I enjoyed it, I guess, if that sentence makes sense. But yeah, not for me. And the last book on this list is The Women by Kristen Hanna, which is a big, big thumbs down to me. I hated this book. I talked about this on one of my previous videos. I will link it. It's like popular books I hated. And I don't want to get into it all again, but I thought this book was the opposite of The Women. There was just the blandest main character for a book that is called The Women. It was basically all about the men in her life and how they affected her. There was way too much romance for a book that's like not supposed to be centered around that. Like, I just feel like romance would be at the bottom of your list after coming home from a war and dealing with like PTSD and stuff. Anyways, that was not the book for me, and so I definitely don't recommend it. So those are my BookTok recommendations and unrecommendations. Again, not the biggest for there on BookTok, but so hard to ignore how popular some of these books are. And plenty of them are definitely worth the hype, so BookTok does definitely have some of these correct, in my opinion. So let me know what you think, if there's any BookTok books that I missed that you want to know my opinions on, or share your opinions on these books. I would love to hear them. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, I would love it if you would, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!